2:24.24 right now. She's obliterating the record.
Alicia Barnell is about to four-peat the only man in history to do it.
Kara Goucher, she wanted to do this event. It was important to her. Here in Duluth, how sweet it is. Her arm raised in triumph.
Welcome, everybody, to the Gearing Up for Grandma's podcast, brought to you with the support of Essentia Health. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Peter Graves, and thank you so very much for being with us. Today, a very special episode. Not only are we on video and recording it that way, we're releasing this interview on race weekend as part of the Essentia Health Virtual Fitness Expo. But we're also joined by today's guest, Grandma's Marathon founder and longtime executive director, Scott Keenan. And Scott, with the brand new book coming out, which was a wonderful read. And thank you for getting it to me and inscribing it. We're very happy to welcome you to the podcast, my friend.
Well, thanks, Peter. It's my pleasure. You know, Grandma's Marathon's in my blood. I've been retired almost 8 years now, but it's in my blood. It always will be. So, and your friendship is always important to me. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have made the connection with Grandma's without you. And there was an interesting chapter about that in there, and Mike Pinocchi. So thank you for that. So, Scott, I mean, I will go forward and backward here, but as I say, you're just releasing a book. It's a very interesting read at all levels. There's some insider stories that I had never heard, and there's some recollections of a lot of people that were close to Grandma's Marathon, close to you, close to me. I was really touched about that. So, Scotty, why the book now? What's the motivation?
Well, the motivation was simple. People have been telling me, say, Scott, you should write a book after my retirement. But I was too busy. I was doing different gigs. I was organizing a sister marathon relationship program with the country Bhutan in Asia. I was going to Reykjavik, Iceland. I was doing a bunch of stuff. I wanted to keep busy, and then all of a sudden the COVID-19 hit in March, and I had all this time, and I just said to myself, this is the time to write it. If I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And so I woke up at around 5 a.m. every day, and I just wrote my thoughts on a yellow legal tablet, and wanted to just start writing. And I'm not a writer, so this was a challenge, but I took it on. I was stubborn, and I was going to do it no matter what. Well,
Stubborn, but also innovative, and never say die attitude is Scott Keenan in spades. You've really been an inspiration, and I have to chuckle when I look back, Scott, at like the budget for the first race, 1977, June 25th. Yeah, and it's probably been asked before, but my guess is you're a young man. Running is just starting to boom. So I was living in Minnesota then. There was lots of things starting to percolate through in the Twin Cities. But did you really dream of creating what Grandma's has become?
You know, not really. I think one of our goals was, after the first race in 1977, June 25th, was to be as big as the Pablo Nurmi Marathon in Hurley, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. At their peak, they had around 1,100 runners. And it's one of the oldest marathons in the country, the Pablo Nurmi. And I ran it in 1974. So one of the goals was, someday we wanted to be as large as the Pablo Nurmi Marathon. And we accomplished that on the third year. In 1979, we surpassed them by quite a bit. And at that point, we knew we had something special. You know, we knew the course was great. We had one of the greatest ambassadors in the world, and that was Gary Bjorklund, who was quoted as saying, what else do you want in a marathon? It starts in the middle of the woods, runs along the beautiful North Shore of Lake Superior, and finishes at a pub. And he did that at a national platform in Los Angeles. So to this day, we have a lot of great ambassadors, but I'll put Gary Bjorklund number one.
Yeah. So when things work this, and dare I say magically, because even now, after all these years, I feel that when I'm up in the tower with Pinoch announcing that race, it's a link to the past and the early days of our sport in Minnesota. But, you know, and I'm not sure if it was you or someone else, but there was always the theory of a world-class race with small town charm, and all that synergy connected together to create lightning in a bottle. And for me, that's got to be authentic. It can't be synthetic. It can't really be manufactured. It just happens. The Twin Ports were ready for a big race. The whole culture up there along the North Shore and the North Country of Minnesota, the welcoming, friendliness, all of that, Scott, you and the people that followed you have been able so successfully to tap into.
Well, it was an exciting time, a running boom a little bit. A lot of the credit, and I pointed out Frank Shorter winning the gold medal in 1972 was a big thing. And the excitement of marathoning races started popping all over the United States. Then Jim Fixx wrote his book on jogging and the benefits of running. And that was in about the same time we were sending 150 runners down the race course in 1977. The sport we had pockets of runners all through this nation. They weren't connected. And even today at Grandma's Marathon, there's no more than 300 full marathon runners in a 30-mile radius of Duluth. And so we had to do something special. We had to invite the world to Grandma's Marathon. And we did, and that's how we had to do it. We had the great race course. We had the key thing that we had to make sure we did was the organization. We had to put on a good race, a safe race for all the runners. And what you said earlier, Peter, I had this goal in the back of my mind too. I was going to invite the world. I was going to have a mini Olympics at Grandma's Marathon every year. I don't care if somebody disagreed with me. We were going to invite the world and some of the best runners in the world as well.
And you've done that, and that continues to happen. And it was interesting in the book, because the book takes you honestly behind the scenes. Not everybody was sold on bringing these super elite athletes in, but you stuck to your vision about, having a great citizen race, but also with some elites to add that undeniable panache that when people talk about Grandma's, they talk about Twin Cities or Boston Marathon or Chicago or New York. It's spoken about among those great races.
Yeah. And that was one of our goals. We figured having world-class runners, world-class guest speakers, and I try to point that out in the book as well, of all the people that have come here to be our guests. And, we didn't have a whole bunch of money to spend on media type of stuff or PR type of things. So I figured one of the best ways is bring the world here and let them tell about us and build those ambassadors. And I think that strategy did work for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, so many questions to ask, but I'll go back a little bit to the beginning, and it's hard to miss, Scott, your North Shore Striders shirt on and the photos behind you and all that, because it was really the nucleus of that group that helped make things happen in the early days.
It was. And the North Shore Striders started with a vision of Dan Kleno, who lives in Fargo, North Dakota now. And by the way, his book is in the mail today. And I can't wait to get him that copy so he can read it. Dan Kleno, Gary Bjorklund, and some others were the ones that started the North Shore Striders in 1968. I took the handoff in 1973 and through 1979. But and I try to point this in the whole chapter on North Shore Striders. Dan Clendon and his crazy band of runners had a vision, and if it wasn't for those guys, there wouldn't be a Grandma's Marathon. And so it was exciting. When I came in, we kind of converted the track road racing track club into 100% pretty much road racing club. And that's what was building up at that time, was all across the country, road races of every distance were popping up, and that was exciting.
Yeah, well, I love the imagery there with the North Shore Striders, and it's fair to point out that in all the years I've known Scott, I've almost never seen a more loyal person, and I mean, it's super admirable, because loyalty and friendship mean a great deal to you, Scott, and I think those are extraordinary human qualities, and it may occasionally make you have to brush up against some tough issues. You wear your heart on your sleeve and all that. But anybody who knows Scott Keenan knows that you have that loyalty, buddy.
Well, thank you. It is. And I'm a traditionalist as well, too. And I like to keep things going. And I don't like things ending. It upsets me. So, but thanks, Peter. That was very kind comments. Thank you.
And so after all the years, and you said you've been retired 8 years, which doesn't seem possible. You had a big decision to make, to walk away from the race that you created. Again, you talk about this candidly in your book. I'm getting the sense that you felt it was the right time, but let's face it, it's still really hard.
Yeah. You know, I made a pledge, and I put it in the book as well. It was important. I couldn't do it anymore, Peter. It was just, I was done, and I try to explain that, some race directors, can sit on their chair and let the thing happen organically. I always was a race director who was more involved. I needed to be involved. I needed to keep moving, and it wore on me. It wore on me organizing volunteers. It wore, who are the greatest people in the world. But I had to call. I called the volunteers for all these years when I left. I had to get to 6,000 volunteers and 250 volunteer coordinators. Raising money was always hard in Duluth. We're a very small market, and we needed to raise money. That was challenging. The weather was probably the biggest factor of where I decided, because it just hurt me so much when the weather forecast said we're going to be rained out and storms are coming and we'll never have the race. If it was from the William Averman 5K or if it was Grandma's Marathon or the national championships, it wore me. And I felt like I was going to have a heart attack if I kept putting this self-induced pressure on myself. I had to step away. It was just the right thing for Scott Keenan. Peter, it was the hardest thing I ever did, but I did it. And I have no regrets on it at all. I found many new chapters in my life, and that was pretty exciting. And the book is another one of those many new chapters.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear that. And the other thing is that I look back, and you were talking about Grandma's Marathon all over the country. I mean, this is well before media branding and PR agencies doing all this stuff. You're going to Boston. You're talking to the athletes. You see how the stands are set up. I mean, and everywhere you went, you were an evangelist for Grandma's Marathon, and you loved it.
Yeah, you had to be. This was the thing that we were doing. We went across the country at races and spoke about Grandma's Marathon. But a key element, I think, that was our success started in 1987. And it's in the book, too, is that when we bid for the Women's National Championships that Janice Klecker won in 1987, we started a relationship very close with women's track and field people. And we won that bid. And we brought the best women in the country to Duluth and to run Grandma's Marathon as a national championships. And we've hosted altogether 9 national championships in Duluth. This was a very important part of getting the national respect that we deserved. Again, we're in a small market. Most of the major marathons and races in the country are in the East Coast or the West Coast. We're in northern Minnesota, a small airport, hard to get to, lack of hotel rooms. We're a point-to-point course where you need bus transportation. And if you don't do that right, you can't leave 1,000 people that can't get to the starting line. It was very difficult. But getting national champions to Duluth, you have to understand how important that was for us to rise in the national visibility of races.
Yeah, and Scott, also within, say, the city of Duluth and St. Louis County, a guy like you who's used to calling the shots and all of that sort of thing, you also had a diplomatic side because you had to work with the mayors over the years. I knew many of them, and they were an essential. I mean, every element of this race and continues to be super important. And there's a very strong chain link that links all these areas together. But at times you had to be very diplomatic too about dealing with things.
Well, every day I had to be diplomatic. I mean, if it's a new city councilor that comes on city council, I had him in my office and told him our vision, what we're doing. If it was a governor, like Governor Rudy Perpich, who was at the finish line for many, many years, how important that was. Paul Wellstone, U.S. Senator, how important he was to coming to Grandma's. State senators, everybody. It was an important part. And I always loved politics. And as you may know,
you were in the city council, weren't you?
For 8 years. And to this day, I still love politics. And so that was a fun thing. And maybe a few of those people I had to put more effort into and convince to be on our side. But it was easy. A lot of people out there were supportive. And once we started bringing the numbers up, the thousands of runners, and then the city of Duluth and the surrounding communities start realizing, hey, there's some money to be made with special events. And special events in the beginning was a headache for a lot of people.
Sure.
And then as we start developing, probably in 1979 and 80, the support came more because of the fact there was revenue for the city coffers.
And along the way to talk about synergy for a minute, I mean, you had a lot of support in Minnesota distance running circles, but you also had enormous support from Dick Beardsley and Gary Bjorklund, two famed Minnesota distance runners. And I mean, Gary grew up around there. Dick lived up around there for a long period of time. And there was great pride in this race. So they spread the message. But how important, looking back, was that duo of Dickie B and Gary in helping also make the event bigger and better?
Well, the ambassadorship that they have given to Grandma's Marathon can never be replaced. I mean, it's nobody has done more than that. And I said earlier, Gary Bjorklund, because he was there in 1977. But in 1981, when Dick ran his first marathon here in Duluth, and with Gary Bjorklund, and Gary was a little overweight in that race, those two running that race side by side for most of the race down the North Shore. It was, and Dick ran a 2:09:37 and Gary ran a 2:11. That took us off. I mean, that was so important to have that relationship that I had with Gary Bjorklund and Dick Beardsley was crucial, I think, too, to getting us going. It was, and there's some great stories about Dick in the book. After Dick ran a 2:09 at Grandma's, there was of course, in life, there's always controversy that comes, and there was when Dick did run that, But those two are, to this day, Peter, are some of my best friends. They're dear friends. They're dear friends to the marathon. And my gosh, I can't even say enough about them. I even went fishing with Dick a couple years ago with one of my grandsons, and it was an experience of a lifetime.
And speaking of stories, there's one that I didn't see in the book, and that was our fishing trip, Scott, up to Crow Lake in Ontario, which was absolutely great. And then remember the Taste of Duluth tour, where you got us all in a bus, and we stopped at the Chinese Lantern and Russ Kendall's and all places all over to Grandma's. Remember that?
Yeah, those, here's the deal with this. There's hundreds and hundreds of stories that have not been told in this book. I mean, I could write more of these books, but I'm not going to. And but yeah, there were so many stories. What I did is I let, and I think the title of the book is kind of guides you what I've done here. It's History and Heroes. And so I focused on a lot of the history and the heroes that were of mine. And so, that's where we went with this stuff. So the stories that came out of my mind were all focused on heroes and history. And so that's how I went. So a lot of stories are not told in the book, but I focus on the people that are my heroes.
Yeah, and there again, it's vintage Scott Keenan. I mean, you helped promote those local restaurants. You took the media out, Bruce Bennett, Marsh Nilsson, so many really dear friends to both of us. I look back and it was so moving because a lot of those people aren't with us right now, Scott. Yeah. And, we all shared some very special moments.
Yeah, it's very emotional when I wrote this book because as you can see through it, many of my heroes are gone. And I lost them, and they're dear friends. And I'm getting emotional right now because I can't read the book anymore because it's too emotional. So there is some emotion in the book, and
of course there is.
Yeah,
and it was really clear to me. I mean, the various passages that you've gone through with people that were so close. So, Scott, is there one Grandma's that stood out beyond all others to you, or do they kind of blend in a tapestry?
Well, I got to wipe this tear off here, Peter, so hang on.
All right.
And, many blend together. That's a correct statement or observation, Peter. But 1977, that first year, I had to put it on the cover of the book. Mm-hmm. Picture of myself handing Gary Bjorkland a glass of water on the race course. I mean, if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have a marathon, and there wouldn't be a wonderful staff at Grandma's Marathon now that works here and stuff. To get that first race under our belt, and there's a whole chapter on the heroes of that first race, and that was the most important one. If I had to name another one that popped out, would be the 1981 race between Dick and Gary, and if I had to do another one, it'd be 2013 when we finished our relationship, our commitment to host the men's and women's national half marathon championships, and that was the date of my retirement as well. So those were great years. And 2012 when Kara Goucher came back here and run the half marathon national championships and won it and set a course record, and that was extremely special.
Yeah, and one of the things that I liked so much about the book was that they included all manner of snapshots over the years, and one of them that I guess maybe I deliberately put out of my mind, and I'm not sure if it was 86, but the really extremely bad weather we had, and I had forgotten just how bad that year got. I mean, the tents, if people can imagine, the tents blew down, all the instruments. I'll let you tell a short bit of the story.
Well, it was in 1986, and that was the year that I bought over 1,000 beers running the race.
That's right.
And but anyways, we won't go that path. But at 6:20 in the evening, tornado type winds came off Lake Superior and blew all the tents. Most of them went in Lake Superior. Tables, band equipment was smashed. It was a terrible storm that came in. It was after the afternoon party and get together and celebration award ceremony. And it was before the evening party that we usually got going around 8 o'clock with the music and dancing and so forth. Nobody got hurt, Peter. It was a miracle. And that the storm hit at 6:20. And after that, in a couple months after that storm is when Grandma's Marathon started. We started moving into the nonprofit and situation, and we became a official Minnesota nonprofit corporation in 1987.
That looks to me like it was handled about as well, really, as it could have been, Scott.
Right.
That transition.
It was. The folks at Grandma's restaurants have been dear friends of mine. If it was Vicky Plucci, Andy Board, Brian Doherty.
Andy.
Yeah, they're all great friends to this day. And we were getting a little big. I think I try to explain in the book that I was getting pretty aggressive as I was in the corporate office of Grandma's restaurants and bringing in national championships. I was spending money. There was obviously the risk in organizing marathons with the storm in 1986. We had a departure, but at that point, it took 2 months for me to set up a nonprofit corporation, and we moved forward and never looked back.
I love the story too about, was it Charlie Rogers saying that the course was a little short, but it wasn't true.
No, it wasn't true. And and if Charlie wants to ever come to Duluth, I will buy him 3 Conies and a Coke at the Deluxe Coney Island on First Street.
Well, you could do that for me when I come next week. Hey, bud, one of the other moving parts, and I had never heard, actually, I don't remember hearing you talk about it, was Steve Prefontaine. I mean, anybody who's ever laced up a pair of running shoes or worn a singlet, most everybody just adores him and the legacy that he created. Now you met him and you spent some time with him out in Oregon, and you have some pictures in the book about it. I mean, to me, that's like the Holy Grail. What was it like meeting him?
It was wonderful. It was that's again when Marty Pavela and Roger Johnson and I took a month off, 29 days, and went to 12 different states out west. I took a break from running at that point, and my friends just took a break. They were non-runners, and they all knew we were going to go to Eugene, Oregon. Though our trip was going to Eugene, and we had no clue if Pre was in Eugene or running races or where he was. But we found his address in the phone book, and we went to his trailer house by the river, Willamette River, and he wasn't there. We waited. We had lunch, and finally he came. We spent 2 hours with Steve Prefontaine and his dog Lobo. The most memorable experience of my lifetime was that, and then I received a letter from Pre afterwards, and I cherish that as well. So you can't even express it in words, Peter, how important that was to me, developing me as a runner, and even developing me as wanting to organize races as well.
That's a great story, and I think that letter is in your home, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. In a cherished spot, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Scotty, over the years too, you paid particular attention not only, to the race itself, but also to the emotional or encouragement aspect of the race. And to that end, you brought in a lot of guest speakers, and a few of them over the years actually made their way down to announce with Mike and I for a while. if you look at the names in the book, it's a who's who, right? I mean, it's stunning. I dare say, when I talk to friends, and I can brag a little bit, I can say, oh, I met Dr. George. I met Greta Weitz. I met, well, on and on it goes, Castor and Rogers. Anyway, the point is, you brought these people in and they gave speeches, and they were really quite powerful. What was the messaging you wanted to get out with bringing those speakers in?
And it's part of the title of this book. I wanted to, and maybe it was a selfish thing on my part, I wanted to bring my heroes to Duluth. I wanted them to send their message to all the runners that we brought in. And it was important for me to do that. Again, bringing elite athletes in, bringing these wonderful, guest speakers and heroes and tell their stories to our people was part of our strategy on getting the word out about Grandma's Marathon. What can get any better when all of a sudden you have a gold medalist, Billy Mills, or Joni Benoit, gold medalist, spreading the word how wonderful it was in Duluth, and Joni running the race the half marathon and the 5K numerous times. Yeah. And spreading that word about us. That was the strategy. And it was very important part of what we're doing is getting those guest speakers and those runners here in Duluth. And I think it paid off. I had no regrets on that. It was an important part for me, and I think important part for the marathon as well.
Yeah. And of course, Dick Beardsley has been doing it for a long time. And more recently, I think, joined with Carrie Tollefson, another Minnesota favorite daughter. And they're very, very good. I mean, that night before, that afternoon before, and people go to the spaghetti feed, and particularly for first-time runners, and they're nervous. They wonder if they've done all the training that's necessary. That this is a huge new physical and emotional challenge. And then to hear these stories, it's very life affirming. You know what I mean? I mean, and it goes, and I really deeply feel this way, as do you. Everybody who runs that race is a winner, not just the fastest time of the day. And we try to reflect that in our announcing at the finish line as well. But your thoughts on that mental side of things in the marathon?
Well, first of all, I just want to add on to how important citizen runners are to Grandma's Marathon. Our two goals are very simple. As I mentioned earlier, is that we wanted to put a safe race, a quality race, have all the bells and whistles that we possibly could put out there for every runner. That was the primary goal. If you can't do it safely, if you can't do it right, don't do it at all. And we want, and that's the title that we've used a lot of times, world-class race, small town charm. We wanted to have everything right. Water stations working to perfection, transportation system working to perfection, finish line working to perfection, medical team on the course and the finish line working to perfection. This was the highest priority I put into the race. And as I mentioned before, bringing elites in and having a mini Olympics in Duluth every year was also an important part. The big thing that helped us too at Grandma's Marathon, many races across the country fight with their municipalities. You have to change the course, there's construction, this and that. Peter, the support we received from all of the counties, Lake County, St. Louis County, City of Duluth, State of Minnesota, so forth, they delayed projects till Grandma's Marathon was over. They hurried up with projects so Grandma's Marathon could be done. The cooperation that we had from all the municipalities it's probably not even seen today in any other major race in the country. And that has led us to be successful as well. It's a big deal in Duluth, and maybe in a big city, it's not such a big deal. It's a headache. Cab drivers can't even get around, but in Duluth, this is a big thing. And the 6,000 volunteers made it that big thing. It's easy to get 6,000 volunteers in Duluth. Other races can't even get volunteers hardly.
Yeah. Well, it's a really volunteer oriented city. It's an active area. We talked to Duluth Mayor Emily Larson a few weeks ago on the podcast, and she was talking about the accessibility of trails for hiking, walking, running, whatever within the city proper is extraordinary. You're never far away from it. So, and this has grown. It's reached more of a critical mass now. I mean, you look at Outside Magazine or other magazines, and every year, like Duluth is in the top 10 of cities or towns, if you're outdoor active oriented, you want to go to.
Well, it is big for running and trails and skiing. I mean, Duluth has been, well known for its skiing background. We've had many Olympians come out of Duluth and skiing, and biking over the last decade has really been taking off. Yeah, it's an outdoor town. I mean, it really is. It's it might be like Flagstaff, Arizona, in one way or another, but it's an outdoor town. People are active, and it might have something to do with it's so darn cold in the winter sometimes that you really cherish the summer with the trails and the biking and the running and so forth. And there's tons of mini waterfalls all over the place in the town. And Peter, if anytime we have time, I'll take you some of those waterfalls. They're just incredible that I know you haven't seen. So
yeah, I'm sure I haven't seen them all for sure. Scotty, at the end of the day, so much of this is about people, and I just maybe get some comments on. I don't want to not mention the effect of the Klecker family on grandmas, because they were hugely important in the early days, and boy, great results too.
Oh yeah, they're dear friends of mine, Barney and Janice and all the 6 kids. And Joe Klecker right now is one of the top distance runners in America, if not in the world. And he's going to be running in the Olympic trials, 10,000 meters coming up soon. And looking for good things from Joe Klecker at the trials. What a great family. And Barney Klecker ran the first 10 races, and probably one of the best races that was ever run, when Barney in 1981 ran a 2:15 marathon with 2 broken toes. And I never seen so much pain on a person's face after they finished. Nobody could have started that race other than Barney, and nobody could have finished that race, but Barney could. And again, Barney and Janice are some of my dearest friends. I stay in touch with both of them all the time. And it was so important to get both of their stories in this book. And Barney and Janice are heroes of mine.
I wanted to ask you about Marsh Nilsson. We have an award for him at Grandma's Marathon, the Marsh Nilsson luncheon. I guess it won't be happening this year, but Marsh was the longtime sports director at KDLH in Duluth, passed away far too young. He had been the PA announcer for the Vikings football games. What a nice man. And I was so happy because he was smart. He was youthful. He had no ego. He didn't act like a television star. He was just a nice guy.
I remember when our office for 2 years was at the Radisson Hotel in 1987 and 88. I remember walking down to his little cubicle office at KDL building, just a block away or less a block away, and go see Marsh, and his office was just covered with photos everywhere, little photos, everything of the history of Marsh Nilsson. And in my mind, we wanted to certainly thank the media, and the best way to do it. And if you look at what we do at Grandma's Marathon, we have awards all over the place. The Rudy Purpich Public Service Award, the Hall of Fame,
Ron Dawes.
Ron Dawes, the best award. It was important early on for me to make sure we recognize other people for what they have contributed. And Marsh Nelson, when we wanted to start that many years ago, to get recognize a member of the media each year, it was a no-brainer to get it the Marsh Nelson Media Award in his name. And the first person that got that award is another dear friend, Kevin Pates, from the Duluth News Tribune. And so that was important, recognizing other people. If you look, and I know you have, Peter, we look at the background of all the stuff, all the people we recognize, it wasn't about us, it was about them.
Yeah. Of course, you mentioned Kevin Pates, longtime writer. He was a guy that just absorbed the marathon and he's really bright, and he's a very clever writer. And I mean, let's say there have been many very strong print journalists locally. Kevin seemed to embrace the marathon in a unique way, didn't he?
Well, he had that running background too, and there's a good portion, well, not a good part, but it's a portion of the book on Kevin, and we both retired in 2013 after long careers. But Kevin is an honest reporter too, and a fair reporter, and I always, if I could give a little scoop to a media person, which I know you're not supposed to do, but if I could, right, I would give it to Kevin Pates every once in a while, and you know that you would get a fair reporting with Kevin, and it wasn't going to be full of stuff that made no sense. It was right down to the wire on the details, and again, Kevin deserved that first Marsh Nelson Media Award back in the old days there.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to talk about Dorothy Spencer a little bit, because you write about her and her late husband in the book, and we're all very close with her. And my image of her more than anything else is like the Energizer Bunny going around, and she'd just do anything, answer phones, put race packets together, and then on the race day, she would be right out front helping people get into the right chute for the finish. And she and her husband Roger were also very instrumental in the early days.
They were, and I met Dorothy, I believe it was 1977. And I was president of the North Shore Striders. They moved from Minneapolis to Duluth, and we became great friends right away. I like to surround myself with people that are doers versus don'ters, and Dorothy's a doer. And as you know, I think would put 10 of those bunnies together with Dorothy, with her energy. And
yes,
and also Dorothy was one of these people that gave me calmness too, and when there was things that maybe I was getting a little raveled on, Dorothy would provide the calmness I needed. And as I kind of put in the book, if I had a second mother, it would have been Dorothy Spencer. And Dorothy was a dear friend, and her husband, Roger, were complete opposite. Roger was laid back, not a care in the world, and Dorothy was hyperactive. And boy, Roger passed on way too early. Dorothy lives by a lake in Wisconsin now, and enjoying every minute of her life.
We have had some extraordinary masters runners over the years at Grandma's, as well as everyone else. One of the names from the older days that stands out to me was Alex Rattel. In fact, I like I told you, Scott, and there are few books that I have sat down and read cover to cover. And when this came in the mail yesterday, I couldn't put it down. It was like I was reliving these very powerful experiences. And I had forgotten just how good Alex Rattel was. He had some incredible marathons very late in life.
Oh, incredible. I mean, I don't remember all of the national and world records of distances that he has done, but the most respected runner, I think one of the most respected runners ever in the history of the state of Minnesota is Alex Rattel. And I had a chance back in the old days to be in his house. And I mean, this guy was a pilot in the World War II.
Yes.
This guy was a race car driver. This guy did more things than anybody ever could dream of doing. And a world-class runner, not a national caliber runner. Alex Rattel was a world-class runner, running races like a 2:30 marathon when he's 50. You know, I mean, it's unheard of. And so Alex, I was fortunate to be good friends with his wife Patty and Alex, and in their later years they lived in Grand Marais, and I had a chance to visit them as well up there in different times. But I had to make sure for sure Alex Rattel got in this book.
Yeah, well, I think you did a really, really good job at getting as many people in as you have, Scott. And it's not easy to write a compendium about somebody's life like you have in that book. So as we get closer to the end of this interview, maybe I'm going to draw the lens back and talk a little bit more about you. So there is Scott Keenan today. There's Scott Keenan back in 1977, creating Grandma's Marathon. Scotty, how have you changed as you've aged, as you've had life experiences, as you celebrated joy and loss? How different are you?
I'm not so sure I've changed much at all. You know, I really haven't. I want to keep busy. You know, I had to check, you know, I try to point this out in some of the last chapters of the book. I got back coaching again, and it was the most wonderful experience. It started in 2018 when I was asked, because they needed a coach at the last minute for the women's cross country team, Division II at UMD. And I coached for 12 years at Division III at College St. Scholastica, but that was 28 years before that. And I jumped out of my socks and said, I'll do it. Peter, I had the most wonderful experience in my lifetime. And I always knew I missed coaching, but I didn't realize how much I missed coaching. And I was an interim coach, so I knew it was a 1 year done, carry my box out after 3 months and say, oops, why am I leaving now? But I have to leave. And now then after that, I started coaching high school at East High School. And I want to keep busy. And I've been doing that 2 years. I'll be doing that again this fall. The best experience I've ever had in my life was coaching at East. And now you don't even know this, but I am the athletic director at Lakeview Christian Academy in Duluth now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I started June
Wonderful.
1st, and I got a call and said, Scott, can you do this? I said, yeah, I can do it. And Peter, the reason is everything people asked me to do, I said yes, because it ended up being the best experience I ever had. So I don't think I've changed at all. I just want to keep busy. I keep wanting doing something. I'm getting emotional. I'm looking forward to new challenges. And at the same time, I still want to be the best husband I can be and the best grandpa I can be.
You mentioned that in the book. And Carrie has been by your side through thick and thin. It's really powerful.
Yeah. I'm crying now because it is powerful.
Okay.
I don't have organizing Grandma's Marathon and being on the city council at the same time. I spent very little time at home. It wasn't easy on Carrie, you know, because I worked just constant hours on it. It's hard, but she stayed with me. That was good.
And such a doer as you, with such tenacity, I've always been impressed when I've been at your house, and I've seen what you do with the tenderest of things, like the gardening you have done. I mean,
Great.
It's extraordinary, but Scott Keenan can appreciate real beauty.
Well, Carrie got me into gardening, and I try to point that out in the book too, is when I got married, I didn't realize I had to dig up the whole backyard for gardens and stuff. And now I'm an amateur gardener and landscaper and built a river. And I love the outdoors. I love the natural beauty and all the birds that come into the yard. It's a lot of fun for me. And I'm sorry for the tears, guys. This is emotional.
You don't need to be sorry at all.
because of you too, Peter.
Oh,
Your friends.
I understand. I mean, we age, we go down this road, and you know, when you write a book, it's by its nature, it's reflective. You know, we're thinking back on old and very tender times, and it's okay. If you had to put into words, and this may be really hard, but what did you, in practical terms, Grandma's Marathon, what did it, putting it on and founding it, mean to you, Scott?
I fell in love with the sport of running, and I was an okay runner, but I had a different calling. I felt I was better at organizing things than running, and so it was very important for me to try to take running and racing to a new level in the Duluth area, and organize a lot of races, and so running, and I'm proud of the North Shore Striders. Having this shirt on today was important, and so proud of how running has developed. And just think, the best thing that's ever happened. How many people in Duluth have changed their lifestyles permanently because of Grandma's Marathon, the Gary Bjorklund Half Marathon, the William A. Irvin 5K, or the Wednesday night at the races through the Young Athletes Foundation? This is what's important. We've gone out, we started people jogging, we got people running, we gave them a goal for them to achieve, to go for, and Grandma's Marathon did that. That's what I'm proud of.
Very powerful hour, Scott, and it's moved me greatly. I know I'll see you at the races. We'll share a hug again.
Save me a big hug, Peter.
Yeah. And I really, once again, with the book in front of me, just recently released, it's really a very, very good book with a lot of stories. If you love Grandma's Marathon like we do, please pick one up. So I think you have a talent for books, Scott. And of course, the current staff of Grandma's Marathon works very hard, and I'm sure you have a very good feeling about their work.
I want Grandma's Marathon to go on for generation after generation after generation, and I'm so grateful that they're working so hard. They have to work hard, otherwise I'd be mad at them. So I'm glad they're working hard and keeping the momentum going. I know it's been so difficult with COVID, but they're doing things that a lot of races aren't doing, and I'm proud of that. So we're having a race this year, and that's great news.
All right. Well, that's it for this week. The Gearing Up for Grandma's podcast is brought to you with the support of Essentia Health, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Please subscribe, rate us, and please tell your friends. Thanks again to this week's very special guest, Scott Keenan. Wonderful to have you, buddy. Grandma's Marathon is proudly presented by Toyota, Members Cooperative Credit Union, and ASICS. We'll see you in a couple of days. The 45th annual Grandma's Marathon is June 19th. I'm Peter Graves. Thanks so very much for listening, and we'll have more podcast episodes now as registration for the 2022 race event approaches on October 1st. Run fast, run far, and have fun, everybody. We hope to see you in Duluth.